All right, boys, we're live. This is episode 56 of the Deconstruction Podcast, brought to you by Jobtable, the simplest way to grow and manage your construction business. Let's kick it off here with one of our latest reviews here. This is from Suckbeer here from Sapphire Kitchens, a kitchen installation contractor out of Toronto. Have been using Jobtable for 2 months now, really enjoying the software. The software is very easy to use and user-friendly. It's really been helping us track our materials and labors on our millwork jobs. Shout out to Suckbeer. We actually met Suckbeer at the show, actually.
Yeah, awesome
Thank you
guy.
very much. Yeah, he was.
Shout out to
Very good.
Sapphire Kitchens.
Yes, sir. How you guys doing?
Good, man.
Very
You?
good.
Very good, very good. We've actually been getting, I spoke to a couple of people, got some good feedback from our last episode with Andrew, the accountant. I actually spoke to someone today, one of our clients who was like listening to it and getting a lot of good insights and feedback come tax season. So good to hear that. If you haven't checked that episode out, it's the one, our latest one right before this. So check that one out. Very relevant right now.
Yeah, it was a good conversation, and it's nice to also get the take from an accountant, right? On softwares to use and what to expect from accountants and when you're running your business, right? So yeah, very valuable episode 55. Recommend every business owner, in the construction game, go and listen to it.
Yeah. Charlie, welcome back. Little hiatus, little red on the cheeks there.
Yeah,
Saw some sunshine, huh?
yeah. I burn, man. I wish I tanned like you guys. It's funny though. 2 of my kids, they tan well, and the other one's like me. He just fries.
Nice.
But yeah, I'd like to say it's nice to be back. It's nice to be back and be on the podcast and talk to you guys, but it's definitely not nice to be back with the snow and the cold and the gray.
I hear that. I hear that. All right, let's get into it. So, one thing I want to ask you guys. So, I've actually been having in the last couple of weeks, I've spoken to a couple of our clients in Jobtable about how it's just speaking to companies they're starting to grow and move up and do bigger jobs and kind of transitioning to larger projects than what they're generally used to. And so, kind of want to hear from you guys in your experience now, like again, starting off 2 guys in a truck, working your way up through like residential and like odd jobs, and now doing like really large projects. So, Johnny, I guess start with you. Like, what are some like general things that you experienced as you guys were transitioning on the plumbing side, executing bigger jobs? Just kind of things to be mindful of, changes like operationally or your systems, or just talk about some of the transition.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. There's what I always say to everybody is, look, it's all a learning curve. What might work for one company might not work for another. What you might think worked for you, again, might not fit in the dynamic of another company. But I think this goes back to, a few episodes ago, we talked about schooling. As long as you know your trade and you're covering costs, sometimes when you're jumping into a larger job, it's not all about the profit that you're going to make. As long as you're not losing money and everything's being covered, it's a learning curve, right? So when you're entering a new sector, understand that, yes, as a business, you always have to make money. I always want to go back to, you want to make money as a company. But when you're also putting your foot into a new field, you got to get a feel for it. And one of the big things that I learned early on as we were starting to transition to the bigger jobs was you got to learn that sector in and out. And the only way to learn it in and out is to first put your feet inside. So a lot of times what I noticed is as we were growing and we started to hit different types of jobs, I was really taking in all the new aspects to it, right? Whether it be holdback, whether it be the formality of how you send your emails, on how you're pricing extras, or how you're dealing with a client. Because sometimes too, different clients, different GCs, different builders, they require different paperwork, So yeah, that was one of the big things that kind of stuck out to me. Because like I always say, on the plumbing side, whether it's plumbing, electrical, HVAC, if you're used to doing 1,000 square feet, you know how to do a takeoff on 1,000 square feet. Well, now if it gets to 10,000 or 100,000, obviously the basics are there to do your takeoffs, but now it's just a larger scale. And I think you have to come down, you have to really learn your business in and out and come down to a formula of what your guys can install in a day. And this goes back to what Charlie says all the time, and I'll let Charlie speak to this one, but you got to really know what your guys can do in a day. And you need to then transition that into your pricing on, okay, I'm stepping into a bigger job. Instead of installing 100 feet, now I'm installing 10,000 feet. Well, how many feet a day can I install? And that's how I'm going to calculate my labor, right? So it's really learning the nuances of the different sector that you're stepping into, right? Because a lot of people look at a big job and they think, oh, you got this $5 million job, you must be making a lot of money. Well, I always say it, the bigger the contract, the less the margin, right? And this is what people really have to understand. Like I know certain GCs or certain builders, on a 20, 30, $40 million project, right? Their profit margin's like 3%, right? So a lot of people have to understand that as you get into the bigger jobs and as you start to scale your company, to get into a different sector that you're not used to, you got to really learn the ins and the outs.
Yeah. Charlie, we'll get into the operational side on your side, but speaking on bids, I'm just curious, like, so before submitting that first like really large bid, let's just say, were there any mistakes that you made early on, looking back, that you could have avoided?
Yeah. And I think the biggest takeaway for all of our listeners that I personally had was the detail of your quote. That is because that explains everything, right? And unfortunately, when you get into these bigger ones, even if it's a smaller one, but especially when you get into the bigger ones, describing exactly what you're going to do and not just leaving it to a phone call, a text message, or even an email. It's listing out exactly what you've included and exactly what is not included. Like I say that all the time. That's my biggest thing, right? Even for the people that are in our office, I say it to my estimator, to my project manager. Even when they turn around, they say, yeah, but this person said this. I'm like, yeah, but you have to understand, unless you have it written on the quote, clear as day, you got to remember, if it falls on them, it's money, and they're going to go after whoever it is to make up that money. So if we're not covered on our quote on what we included and what we didn't include, very descriptively, then we're dead in the water.
Your quote is
Because
your quote is ultimately a layer of protection. I can't tell you the amount of disputes that were diffused because we went back to our quote, and they would argue that, well, look, we listed this and this on the drawing, and because there was lack of information, Johnny and our estimator, they excluded those specific notes off the drawing into our quote. So we say, yeah, that's great that it's on your drawing, but there wasn't enough information provided at tender, so we've excluded it. I'm sorry, right? And it kind of supersedes anything. So, to Johnny's point, it's kind of like the end all and be all sometimes when it comes to arguments.
Yeah, that's so true. Even like not even for big jobs, but I always ask when I speak to clients on Jobtable. I've been recently like asking everyone, like going through like some of the product. When you're building out a quote, like we have the terms and conditions. Like I always ask everyone, like, oh, do you have terms and conditions similar to this? And I'm often very shocked at how many people say like, no, I don't. Like I'm talking like at least like 7 out of 10 people I speak to say like, yeah, I don't really have terms and conditions.
And that's a big misconception too, because a lot of these people that don't are smaller size companies for the most part. And they think in their heads, I'm going to do a basement rental. They don't feel like they need to have those terms and conditions. But really, it's essential whether you're a
Yeah.
one-man company or you're a 100-person company, you have to have these in place because even a one-man show can flood a basement or, have an argument of what's carried on the job and what's not. right?
And I think a lot of it too, guys, and for anybody listening, I think it's going to resonate with you guys. It's just, look, as a tradesman, you're coming in to do a God honest job, and you have a good heart, right? And you don't think that the person on the other side, whether it's a homeowner, whether it's a GC, whether it's a property manager, you don't think that they're going to do that. You don't think that they'll come after you for something that you didn't, put in the description, clear as day. But the reality is that's exactly what they're going to do if it's going to cost them money. And it's sad because, people go into this with a passion to do a lot of work and to do the job properly. But I always say, everything's good when times are good. It's when shit hits the fan where you're going to really see the true colors of people, right? And I look, I have great relationships with some people, with a lot of our clients. But look, when things get hairy and it comes down to money and especially big dollar values, they have no problem coming after you for what that discrepancy is. And that's why being descriptive and getting back to what you're saying, Costa, if it's 7 out of 10, that's 70% of, and I don't care if you're a one man in a truck or, like Charlie said, 100-person company. It all comes down to being very descriptive. Like I was trying to say earlier, my estimator, my project manager, I say whether you're asking for something from a supplier, whether you're providing something to another project manager, you're sending a bid in, you gotta go with the assumption that unfortunately everybody around you is stupid. And what I mean by that is you're asking people to jump into your head and to understand what you put on that piece of paper. So the more descriptive you are, the more it's outlined for them that are reading it. Because a lot of times, like, look, as a plumber, I can, give you 100 examples in saying, yeah, we said we were going to connect this to this and this to that, but they don't understand. They're not plumbers, right? Or they're not an electrician, or they're not an HVAC guy. They're not a drywall guy. They don't understand the detail. So it's up to the contractor to put it plain as day on their quotes, what I'm including, what I'm not including. If I get there and I open this up and this is like this is not included, right? When I tell you I'm, for example, I was talking to somebody who said, yeah, I told these people I was going to tile their bathroom, and we talked about it. And, I told them I was going to do the floor and I was going to do the shower walls. But then when I got there, they said, no, we talked about doing tile all the way up. And I asked him, I said, well, what did you put on your quote? And he's like, well, I just put tiled bathroom. I said, but why would you do that? Because tiled bathroom, yeah, that can mean just the floors. That can mean just the walls. That can mean the tile and the shower walls. That can mean the tile on the floor, the tile on the shower walls, and all the tile all the way around. So did you give a square footage? Did you give a price per square foot? Did you say, if you're meeting a corner, that corner has to be done by, that corner has to be squared by somebody else, because you spend a lot of time trying to, make that corner work if that is an issue for you. So, description, again, is key, right? What you've included and what your terms and conditions are. This one I need to get paid. This is, if I don't get paid by this day, this is what I charge, as a fee for every, day late or every week late. This is the assumption that if I get there and I open this wall, I can tie into this joist. But if I open this wall and that's not there, then, this can be deemed as an extra. Like, just be very descriptive. It doesn't hurt,
Construction.
5-10 minutes to really be very thorough. That will save you hours and hours of arguments, or even, thousands of dollars in lawyers.
Yeah, I was going to say construction, it truly is the finger pointing industry, and it's what you can prove, right? So protect yourself at all costs, because if something goes wrong on a site, the first thing that they do in construction is look for the person that they can blame and who's going to take on the cost to make it right. And, Johnny, as well as I do, that it's a very, very tight industry when we're talking about margins for profit. So any fuck up that there is, any time that's costing you on site, that's slowing you down. Everyone's out for blood. Unfortunately, it's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
Just I was going to quickly say on your original question, Johnny said it's a loaded question, and it truly is, and there's a lot of layers to peel back. But I just wanted to speak on a couple of things that were relevant to me and Johnny and our growth in the beginning. And one of the things that still stands out to me when I look back and I think, what helped us grow the most in the beginning, and was us being able to divide and conquer, right? I have the utmost respect for construction guys that own their companies and don't have any partners, and they kind of, they take on everything themselves. It's very impressive, but it can also slow you down, depending on the type of person that you are and the ego that you have. I think the main lesson that I took from it is that you're not the best person at your job. You never will be. And it's very naive to think that you can do it all. So by, me and Johnny really identifying our strengths and our weaknesses early on, and divvying up the responsibilities of the company, it really launched us to new levels that we would not have reached if we didn't do that. And I think anybody can take that lesson, even if you're an owner without partners. Look at it in the sense that if, I'm going to be the one doing the estimate so I can keep the work coming in, then obviously I can't be, on the tools every single day. So that means that you need to find somebody and you need to train them to kind of take over the workload, as much of it as you can, to allow you to be more in the office and drive around and price jobs, whatever it is that you do. Or it might be the opposite. Maybe being on the tools is your passion and your love, and you're just obsessed with building your brand and making sure that, you get your clientele, kind of growing by doing good work and not making sure that you're not putting it in the hands of some guy that you just hired. So it could be the opposite of hiring an estimator, somebody that can drive around and understands how to measure rooftops or whatever it is, whatever trade you're in. But the point being that you can always hire somebody that's as smart as you, if not smarter than you, right? If you're fortunate enough to have a partner like I did with Johnny, then obviously, divvying up the tasks and the responsibilities
Yeah.
is the way to go.
That's an interesting one because, I speak to people who, a lot of people out there listening don't have a partner and are
Yeah.
solo owners, right? So I'm curious, how likely do you guys think you would get to like the level you are if you didn't have a partner?
I think it would have been more difficult, but if again, there's people out there, you're very naive to think that, like, let's say Johnny was on his own and now he had to price jobs and that was his strength. So now he needs like somebody that's a very good plumber. He can find somebody. It's not like they're not out there. It might have been more difficult to find somebody. You might have to give them, some shares in the company to really motivate them to produce and care more than the average person. But, to think that they're not out there, with that kind of mentality, you'll never grow. I do think that it is more difficult because obviously me and Johnny grew this from nothing, right? From a little sprout in the ground to what it is now. So nobody cares about iPlum more than me and Johnny, right? Nobody ever will care about iPlum more than us. So that's just the natural, reality. But with that being said, we all know somebody in construction that's one owner and they've done very well for themselves. I know over 50 guys that are doing better than me and Johnny, and they're just solo owners, right? But you ask them, who do they have? Yeah, I got fucking an amazing estimator that I can rely on. I have, my foremans are great. I pay them well. Where there's a will, there's a way, and it's not impossible to do at all.
Yeah, but in saying that too, I know a lot of people that have had problems with partners, and actually, this goes to our conversation this morning, Costa, when we're having like our own internal conversation, and I've seen it all too many times. I've heard all too many stories, and we get asked all the time, how do you guys work so well? We're going on 17 years of being partners, and I look at it like my partner. I have my wife that obviously I got married to start a family, And the way I look as with your partner, getting back to what you said, Costa, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it was key to say right now is at the core, when you have a partner, your values have to align. Your core values have to align. That's number one. But also on top of it as a partner, you cannot be tit for tat. I think partnerships are very hard, um, but they're also a beautiful thing because, like I said, I got married to my wife to start a family and obviously, love each other and whatever. Now, I get married to my partners, whether it's, you two or, Charlie on the iPlum side, to provide for our families. You see what I mean? So for example, when you look at making money, it's not just about me. It's about feeding your guys' table too. And when you guys are down, I'm there to pick you guys up. And when I'm down, you guys are there to pick me up, just like you would in a marriage, right? Sometimes, people are having an off week, off month, whatever it may be. Maybe there's a lot of things going on, and that's the beauty of what a partnership could do. But I also hear a lot of horror stories where one partner screws over the other one, steals, does this, does that, or it's tit for tat. And that's where I think that you have to, you got to drop that in order to make a partnership work, right? Because the partnership is all about building a business. And why do you build that business? You build a business to have a better life together, right? To obviously build something from the ground up, but also too, once you have your family and your kids grow up and everything like that, everybody benefits together, right? So Costa, your kids, Charlie's kids, I look at them like they're my nephews and nieces, right? So all I want to do is provide for them, just like I want to provide for my own family. And I know you guys have that too. And I think it comes back to what you said this morning, having that core value, right, to make a partnership work. Now, getting back to the person who's running the business all by themselves, like Charlie said, I tip my cap to those guys because look, it's hard to get to where we are today, and I have a partner. I could just imagine trying to do that all on my own would be, yeah, it's a crazy feat. Now, like Charlie said too, where there's a will, there's a way, but it's not easy because, especially in construction, because the problem with construction is you have to be on site. But when you're on site, you have to overlook the site. But at the same time, you need to grow the business. So you need to go out and see clients. A lot of times, a lot of clients want to see you during the day. During the day, you need to be on site. You need to have guys on site. You have multiple sites going. So how do you do it? And that's where you really gotta, kind of divvy up the responsibilities. And for those guys that are one guy in a truck and they don't have a partner, that's where the hires are extremely important, right? The people that can run the office, the people that can run the site, while you as the owner, your main key job is to bring in more clients, build the relationships so that you have future work, right?
I was gonna
So
say quick, just to that point, and a lot of these guys that you speak to, they actually sound very hopeless when you talk to them about growth. They kind of feel like, or they sound when they're talking about it that they're kind of stuck in this spot where, well, you know what, I'm kind of good where I am because once I'm done this job, I got to go price this, and there's no, it's kind of like this cycle that they're trapped in, right? So I see that on one end, but then I ask them, okay, well, have you interviewed anybody recently? And they say no. Oh, I don't know where to look. And it's just like they don't really take the necessary steps to try to actively find somebody to take over some of their tasks, right? They're very set in their ways. And that's where I think like you really have to draw a line in the sand here. Like you can kind of feel for them to a certain extent, but then, are you actually actively trying to solve this problem? Because if you're not, then my sympathy goes out the window, right? Like you should be interviewing people every single week until you find the right candidate that you can kind of bring and put under your wing and teach them how the ins and outs of your business in order to start that process, right? If not, then you're going to be where you are forever. And that's just, it is what it
Yeah,
is.
people like that. I mean, yeah, I don't think sympathy is not even the right word. Like they're just not gonna grow. Like it's not gonna happen, right? I'm talking about the solo operators who are, proactive in a way and like actually trying to grow. And I think as a solo owner, like you guys said, I agree with everything you guys are saying. And I tip my hat off to all solo founders, owners who are doing it themselves, because I think you have to have like really locked in processes and systems, and like you got to know how to hire, who to hire. Like these are really nuanced skill sets that you need to have, and like you can't afford mistakes on that end. Whereas like if you have a partner and your systems aren't as locked in, let's just say, but at least you have a partner that can kind of pick up the slack, and even through the lack of good systems and processes. But yeah, that's interesting.
It's an interesting one, and I'll give you one story just to like kind of end this one topic here. But um, I obviously, even with our competitors, even if they're not competitors, bigger companies, I'm always talking to people in the industry, especially on the mechanical side, because we bounce a lot of ideas, and you're always trying to learn. So and I don't want to name names here, but there's a very, very big company around us here that I've become kind of friends with their main guy. And I was just picking his brain one day and just talking to him, and he kind of opened up on their process. And it was crazy because we got on a Zoom call and he was showing me the jobs, like a couple of jobs that we're doing. He was breaking it down, how he has it on a 3D model, and he literally has it down to like each pipe. And I was blown away, because me being in the office and looking at the office side, I looked at this and I was like, holy shit, man. Like, wow. Like personally, I've never seen this. Like, and I've, even back in the day, working for big companies, and even still having those relationship with those companies. Like, I remember after talking to this guy, I went to the guys I used to work with. I'm like, do you guys do this? And he's like, no. He's like, that's crazy. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because he's an employee, right? And this company got him. So, and I was joking around with him, and I was just like, they must be taking care of you. And he's like, put it this way. He goes, they're taking care of me to a point that even for me to go on my own, it doesn't make sense. Right. So this gets back to that hire, right? This guy, if I had to guess, this guy's between 3 to 450,000 a year in a salary, plus, truck, phone, now again, this is a massive company. They're probably doing, 60 to 100 million a year in revenue, right? So a lot of people would think that's a crazy high salary, but what this guy has done for that company, and the processes and procedures that he's brought in to, and remember, this was an already established company, how he's streamlined a lot of the processes, made installs almost, you can get a dummy to install, because he's made it almost like a Lego piece, right? And he's giving like instructions. I look at that where, look, if I were to get into that type of work, like that large work where, you're talking contract values of 50, 60, 70 million per contract, that would be somebody that you would look at and be like, okay, I'm going after this guy, right? Why? And you can look at it in any industry, right? Look at, Elon Musk on all of his companies, look at Jeff Bezos. These guys are hiring the best of the best, right? And unfortunately, sure, they are solo entrepreneurs. They're the ones who had the idea, but you got to bring in a team that, we always say they're smarter than you, right? They know the ins and the outs on a specific sector better than you. So getting back to what Charlie was saying too, if you're trying to grow and you're not actively looking for that person that will teach you a thing or two, where you guys can mesh together, it's hard to grow, right? The reality is you cannot wear all the hats.
That's a good point. So that kind of thinking of like just a question now. So, speaking to a company now that's like just starting out, you're not as big as that company. You don't have the capital to invest and pay 300,000 for a salary. So what people will do in a case like that is find someone that you try and build up and train. So, that begs the question of what's more what's the more efficient path to go through? Is it just biting the bullet, hiring someone with the experience, or hoping that you can train someone and, make that person that like A player?
Well, the reality of it is, if you're a small company and you have a limited budget, it's going to be, trying to build somebody up, right? It is what it is. Now, if you're more established and you have the bankroll to do it and you can just throw money at people, then that might be the way to go. Or, I mean, you might be a company that has money and you just have a good system of building people up, because especially too, if you want like a company that has longevity and you want to keep this going far after you're gone and you can step away, then I think having the habit of building people up is always the way to go, right? Um, because it's very hard to find the right people and let alone get them to actually stay, right? So if you can actually have a culture of bringing people in, you take care of them, you almost have this like kind of family orientated kind of mentality, and everybody thinks they're part of this team and they're with you from the beginning. I think it's a lot easier for them to care than somebody you're just hiring, just throwing money at, right?
But this is where I also think hiring is truly a skill set, and just like with any other skill set, it gets
Absolutely.
better with the experience and time.
Yeah.
So I think, and I feel like a lot of people overlook this part of hiring. Most people think you're hiring someone, like you're interviewing that person, they're trying to convince you on why you should hire them. I flip that. Like I'm the total opposite. I'm actually doing more of the selling to that person, trying to really express and convince them like why they should now like take the leap of faith to join me in my mission and get them to buy into what we're doing, and just building that confidence. And I feel like if you are able to do that, you'd be surprised at how many people would be willing to maybe take a pay cut to join this mission because they're pumped, they're excited, like they're bought into your mission. Whereas if you're just like doing a random interview and like expecting people to convince you, I don't think you're going to find the right people.
I mean, I'll push back a little bit on that cost. Like, look, if you're talking about a software startup, then I'm with you, right? But if you're talking about an electrical company where it's like, I'm going to pull BX whether I work for you or whether I work for this guy, right? I mean, yeah, you can sell me on the culture. Obviously what I'm making per hour is going to be a deciding factor, but there's only so much you can do. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, look, I have a nice shop. You're going to get to drive a nice truck. At the end of the day, the jobs are pretty much the same, right? The tasks are going to be pretty much the same. Now, if you're going to grow within that company, then that's, then you can make a case for it where it's like, look, I'm not just hiring you to be a foreman. Eventually, I want you in the office. I want you pricing. I want you to take over the management side of things. Then, yeah, you could sell that, right? But again, tradesmen are a dime a dozen. We talk about this all the time. There's no shortage of tradespeople. So to have the eye to find the person that you think you can just hand off all of these responsibilities to is not easy to do, especially with 150 to 200 competing plumbing companies that are out there, if not more, right?
I don't know. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I don't think that's really any different than a software. For example, I would make the argument, like, let's say you're hiring for like a salesperson at a software company. You think, tradesmen are a dime a dozen. We're talking like fucking like 100 dimes a dozen, especially when you're hiring remotely. Like the amount of people are endless. But at least in my experience, if you take enough time to do it, like you're gonna find a diamond in the rough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you always do. You always do,
I,
for sure.
I agree with both sides. I just want to add one thing to that though. When you're looking, getting back to like the smaller companies, the one guy on a truck or somebody that's trying to scale their business. Even right now, even us, one of our, I don't want to say recent hires, but one hire that we did not too long ago, within the last 2 years. I always look at the person's demeanor, right? Because can you work with that person? And sometimes, especially in construction, sometimes and you get people flipping from one industry to another and coming into the construction industry. But this gets back to, like, we've talked about this many times. You got to see the eagerness, right? You got to see the eagerness, right? Like I said, we had this co-op kid. He's like, love this kid, 16 years old. I am yet to meet in the last 5 years a 16-year-old with the drive like this kid, So it's like, this is a kid I'm going to take my time to teach so that he can learn, because I know that he's going to be an asset. So a lot of people, like getting back to what we were saying, a lot of people that have money, they'll go after the asset, right? But that asset that you're going after also started from somewhere. And that guy probably had an eagerness to build himself up to get the knowledge that he has, right? So sometimes getting that person at the entry level and building him the way you want to build him is just as valuable. And that's what people have to really understand, that you want to go out there and you want to get that licensed electrician that has run this job, that has done this. We've been down that road, and trust me, a lot of times, sure, the guy might know a lot about the industry, but he was trained in a certain way that, getting back to, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? And you can't break him out of his bad habits. And unfortunately, even though he's great in this thing, it's detrimental in this way, where if you take somebody from the ground up, but that has that eagerness, and you could tell he's smart, he has a good head on his shoulders, and he wants to learn and he wants to grow, sometimes that asset is just as valuable as somebody who has reached the top, right? Because if you're in your building stages, you want that person to build with you, learn the ins and the outs of the business as you're going along, learn the way you work, and that's where you'll see where they fit into the puzzle. Right. And me and Charlie, actually, we ran into this, years ago, where we kept looking for the licensed plumbers, licensed plumber, licensed plumber, licensed plumber. You hire him, he lasts a week, gone. Hire another one, lasts, a month, gone. And we kept looking at each other. It's like, man, like, what's wrong with these guys? Like we had a running joke. And what we noticed was, 5 years passed by, and it's like, we could have hired a guy fresh off the street, and after all this time, we could have taught him. And we have that now. I say it all the time. We have third years that I've hired licensed guys, and I have third years that will dance circles around these licensed guys, So sometimes don't look for that person that says they're at the top. You got to take the time to train them so that they can fit into the company perfectly. And this goes back to what you were saying, Costa. It doesn't matter if you're a software company, if you're a construction company, if you're it doesn't matter what industry you're in, right? This goes for any industry, right? Sometimes stop looking for that top dog and build your top dog.
I don't think there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah, there isn't. But I think the key to that is you have to really take the time to invest in that person. Like, take the time to train them. And I think it's a lot easier said than done in practicality, because at the end of the day, you're wearing like every hat in the business, you're running around doing everything, and you have to now take the time. So I feel like naturally what happens over time, you kind of just expect this person, you teach them once, you just think they're gonna, know that thing. But if you're not like monitoring that and like investing the time to train this person, what naturally happens, there's just decay that happens over time, and that you don't even realize there's decay happening unless like when you go back in, you realize like, shit, like I've been letting this guy kind of loose and he's not doing the things in the right way.
Definitely. And you know what? Just to get back to the construction industry, if you're one man in a truck, you're running your own business, the first thing you have to do as you're trying to scale your business is you have to hire somebody. And my recommendation is you either hire somebody with a little bit of experience, or somebody, like I said, that has an ambition to learn in that industry that you're in, right? Now you got to train him, because a lot of people want to get somebody to go out and do the estimates, go out and do this, go out and do that. Well, guess what? You're stuck on the field. And as the work comes in, you're going to have nobody to take the workload off, right? So this is where I get back to, you got to crawl before you walk. You got to walk before you can run. And so that's like step number one, is finding your helper. Once you find that helper, it's going to take a year or 2 years as you're training him, then maybe you're going to add somebody else to the mix, right? As that person gets trained, and like you said, Costa, you got to invest the time, not just have somebody there saying, go get my tools, go do this, go do that. No, I remember when I hired my first apprentice, I used to get annoyed where they were asking the same question so many times, but then something set in where it's like, wait a minute, they're asking because I need to take the time to train. Like that's what you have to do in order to get them to that level, right? And that's what I tell all of our apprentices. It's like, ask the foreman. I don't care if you've asked. If you have any slight of doubt, questions are good, right? That means that you want to learn the right way. So that's like the first key to the first piece to the puzzle, in my opinion.
That's why podcasts like this and others are so important because when me and Johnny were starting out, we didn't have any of this stuff. If I knew what now, if I knew back then what I know now, any job I went to by myself, I would have had somebody hired, a kid, a 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid, and he would have been shadowing me every single day, right? And just to see what we're doing, the ins and outs, and if I can't make it to the job, I'll send him just to, to do the little stuff. You should always have somebody shadowing you because eventually you will have to step away, right? And then the counter again to your point, Costa. I don't think there is a right or a wrong answer, and both answers might be the correct one on your like in your company. Me and Johnny right now we could use a monetary hire of somebody that just comes in with experience that we could just kind of slide them in and start working right away. And other parts of our company need attention where he said we need a couple of apprentices that we need to, to build up and turn into superstars. So it really depends where you're at as a company, how much money you have, how much time you have. It's just a kind of, that's the equation. You have to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, no, for sure. You mentioned, Johnny, earlier about competition. So kind of switching gears a little bit, oftentimes in construction, a lot of guys are kind of closed off. They don't want to share certain things, but then there's like other pockets, like in a lot of the circles and like Jobtable clients and people we're around, like it seemed to be very like opposite of that and like collaborate, share things. So, you know, why do you think there's like this discrepancy on like you're either like very closed off or you're very open to collaboration? Is this like a generational thing? Is there like a shift maybe happening in construction or what do you think?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. I think a lot of it is a generational thing, but a lot of it too, they look at competition like it's a bad thing. Like I said, this one mechanical company, I learn a lot from them, right? And who knows, one day I might be their competitor, but I won't look at them just as a competitor, right? Because again, there's a lot of work out there, and if you think you're going to get all the work, you're crazy. Um, I think it's better to be open, and try to help each other out because you never know when you're going to need them. Like I remember we used to sub work off of, a guy that's really dear to us, and um, he taught us a lot, like a shit ton. And obviously we outgrew him, and we're way bigger than he is now. But the beautiful thing is I still look at him like one of my mentors. And I learned so much from him that we got to a point where I was like a competitor of his, but I also promised him, and I was a man of my word, that it's like, even though I sub this off of you, even though they know I'm a different company, I will never step on your toes, right? Like my relationship with you is worth more than how much business I can get from your existing clients, And I think that's why too, Costa, like getting to the core of your question, why a lot of the older generation and maybe some of the new ones too are closed off is because there's not a lot of people left in this world, I always say, that are men of their word, right? So if I'm helping you with something, why would you stab me in the back? Why would you do that? Because that just goes to speak to your character, and you see it a lot. And a lot of people say it's just business. I say it all the time. I hate that terminology. Um, so yeah, I do think that there is generational where a lot of them, like the older generation, they are very closed off. And it's because they've been burnt so many times by people that said, I won't do this, and they've done it to them. So, getting back to that saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Um, and I feel like our generation is kind of breaking those barriers. But at the same time, I still think that there is a core issue of people being a men of their word, right? So again, if you need help and I'm going to help you, let's just say, okay, you know what, I'm very busy. I'll sub this job to you. Just remember, once you go there, you know, if this guy goes behind my back and tries to say, hey, will you price this job directly for me? Screw this guy. You'll stand there because you know I gave you that shot, right? I think that's a big that's like at the core of it why people are closed off. That's my opinion again.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
definitely think that's one of the angles for sure. But I think it is a generational thing. I think people have just changed. I think information is so abundant now. It's just everywhere you look, you can learn how to do anything.
Exactly.
And it's
Yeah.
just this that the world is so different now where back then it's like we had this I think it was this false vision that everything was like secretive, but really it's like if you needed information you had to go to the library and pick up a book and get it. It was just the way things were. Now that everything's out in the open, I feel like people are more out in the open because it's like if Casa asked me a question about plumbing, which 20 years ago I would have hesitated to tell him the answer to. If I don't give him the answer, he can just ask Chat GPT and get it from Chat GPT.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's like there's really nothing to hide anymore, right? We might as well just be honest and open and help each other out.
Yeah. Information is no longer a competitive edge, which
No.
at one point it was, right? Now it's not. And but like I also think that there's a net positive in being open, like having this information available and like not having information as guarded. I think that's a net positive for everybody.
Yeah. A great example of this is like, look, the painting behind you, right? Let's say I wanted to buy that painting and somebody says, I want $15,000 for the painting, whatever it is. I can't afford it. We live in a day and age, I can now go to YouTube and I can learn how to paint that painting if I really want to take the time to do it, right? So that goes for anything. If I want to do some plumbing work myself, I can learn how to do it myself. I can look at videos and everything, and then go up a notch. Now I'm learning how to price. I have questions about pricing. So I'm starting a business. How do I do how do I do estimates? How do I measure out a roof? How do I do this, do that? I can look it up. I can get that information. There are tools out there that will help you do that. So it's really in nobody's benefit to keep information from others at this point,
Yeah.
right? And like Johnny said, if we're there's the pie is so big, whether you're in software, whether you're in construction. So at the end of the day, if being friends with your competitors, I can't tell you the amount of times that we've met competitors, direct competitors at golf tournaments. And, first you have this kind of like, they have this look on their face, you're looking at each other, kind of sizing each other up, right? And then you get to talking to them, they're like, fuck, man, we're actually really busy, we can't even keep up. And say, fuck, you know what, we're a little slow right now, you know what? And then they'll turn around and say, well, I heard you guys do really good work. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, let's get together, let's have a lunch. Maybe if we have some extra work, we can sub it out to you guys. Next thing you know, you guys are bouncing ideas off each other, you're helping each other out. Maybe one of your suppliers is out of pipe. Hey, can you do me a favor? Can I pick up a couple lengths from your shop? No problem, right? At the end of the day, we're all humans, and I think it's a positive thing that we're kind of getting back to these roots where
I
we
think
can
so
help each
too.
other out.
I think so too. And the better companies get and services improve, I think that's good for everyone as well because that forces you to step up your game. So the more information people get, the better they get, the quality improves, and like that just improves the industry as a whole, and
That's a
eventually the
great
output for the customer as well.
That's a great point. It's gonna make people really sharpen up their pencils and their swords and be the best that they can be, right? It's like, oh, this plumbing company, I've been using them for all these years, and I don't know, I don't really like them, but I don't know of any other plumbing company that can handle this work. And then they go out and find out that there's 50 other companies that are much better. Now they stop using the original guy. He's going to be forced to have better pricing, to have a better product, right? To be more reliable. It's just going to force everybody just to kind of elevate their game.
Yeah, exactly. All right. This was good. Let's wrap it there. Um, Good episode. Appreciate everyone listening. If you got this far, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening. Make sure you don't miss another episode. If you're a contractor, a trade looking to improve the admin side of your business, alleviate headaches, just have more structure, check out jobtable.com. There's a 14-day free trial. Do check it out and see why, thousands of companies are now operating on Jobtable. So, yeah, boys, anything else to add?
No, I think that's it.
No, other than I want to give a shout out to all of our listeners. I know we run into new ones every day, every week. We truly do this as a passion to give as much information to anybody listening. And like I always say, I want to see comments, leave comments, reach out to us. Again, just trying to build a community, and, we really appreciate everybody who has reached out and everybody who listens.
Yeah, we say our door's open, and it truly is. We're not just saying that. Being a part of Jobtable has introduced us to hundreds, if not thousands, of companies and tradespeople, and the community is truly growing. And if you have any questions, you need help with anything, feel free to hit us up. And honestly, the more contacts we have, the better it is for us too, because we might need to bounce some ideas off you guys as well. So feel free to hit us up anytime.
Amazing. All right, boys. Pleasure as always.
Till next
Have a
week.
good week. We'll talk soon.
Ciao, boys.
All right.